You've had best-selling books. I mean, books that have outsold anything else, millions of copies. You've launched people's careers because of that. You launched the #1 podcast in the world. You're sitting down and you're talking to the 20-year-old Matt Pinto, and you had some wisdom to give to yourself. What would that be?
Well, okay, one of the first things that I probably would have done is...
I refuse to stay in a victim mentality. I gotta stand and fight for my honor and my family. That's how I did it, cause you know that's how it had to be. So now I'm slaying dragons and I do it happily. I told him I refuse to be another casualty. I looked inside the dragon's eyes and then I told him casually, hi, I'm a dragon slayer and I got a dragon lair. I'ma go and slay a dragon, then I'm gonna drag him there. I don't care, I ain't scared. Look inside my heart and there's a lion there. Conquering my dragons, I ain't fighting fair.
Today's giant is Matthew Pinto. Matthew is founder and president emeritus of Ascension Press, who was responsible for the #1 podcast in the world in 2022. He also founded the Genesis Group, a Catholic venture capital company focused on funding founders in the Catholic ecosystem. Matthew co-founded the Theology of the Body Institute and is an accomplished author of several best-selling books. Matthew was awarded the 2004 Catholic Leadership Award from the Catholic Leadership Institute.
Thanks, Nico, and it is great to be with you, Matt. So I'm excited to have you on the show for a lot of different reasons. One of the things that happens a lot with guests is that they say, okay, first of all, you've got your regular Fortune 500 leader, you've got your entrepreneur who's building a big business, the traditional types of things, or people trying to build a sales career. But there's a lot of people that lead mission-oriented things from a different perspective, either a full-on non-for-profit, and they want to know, how do I lead non-for-profits? The answer is always shocking to them, and it's really, there's no difference. They don't get that, but you can show them how. But the other thing too is this, this is, I'm leading a faith-oriented thing. So I have a lot of people that are interested in the mission because of that. And so there's maybe some pure motives that people have that are really good. For the most part, that's generally it. Then others that maybe hide behind a motive. And so you have to help kind of redirect them. This is at least the challenge that people will usually state. You've done a fantastic job. You've led many organizations, but when you've done it, you've had best-selling books. I mean, books that have outsold anything else, millions of copies. You've launched people's careers because of that. You've had the #1 podcast, or at least launched the #1 podcast in the world for a while. I mean, you have done a ton, and you've done it through this particular Catholic space, but with this outcome that would be envied by anyone in a secular business. It has been really fantastic. And I remember we met, I think it was 20 some years ago. We were talking most often about marketing. Do you remember when we went to dinner at 4th Base and they had like crab legs the size of your arm?
I do remember that. I think up in Wisconsin, I was up to see you maybe, I think.
Yeah, it was up in Wisconsin. I don't think that place is even around anymore. I haven't been there in a long time. But anyway, it's fantastic to have you on. Is there anything you'd want to flesh out about your introduction before we start getting into the Q&A?
Yeah. Well, first off, maybe one correction, Nico, in particular. I think this is the first time I've ever been referred to as a giant, because at a whopping 5'5", I have always been on the short end, including more than a few prom dates, where the evidence, the pictures after the fact show the date taller than me in high school. So that has not changed. So giant needs to be a broader definition, in this context. But let me just start by saying, Dave, I've been a fan of yours for a number of years. I consider myself high energy, intense, but Dr. Durand, Mr. Durand, Reverend Durand is at a whole nother level, everyone. And so I'm delighted to be with you.
Hey, speaking of titles that have never been used before for me, you just threw some out there.
Saint David. Saint David. So
aspiring.
I've been looking forward to this, because this is going to be a great conversation, I think, simply because what you bring to the table and hopefully what I bring to the table.
Yeah, you definitely bring a lot. And it's fun, especially this new group that you're putting together, the Genesis Group. But let's kind of walk through some of this historically. The entrepreneurs can learn so much. And I know you've been invited to a lot of different places to speak about entrepreneurship, to speak about leadership. So we definitely want to get into those things. Just kind of starting off, a lot of people are confused about, how do I know if I should be an entrepreneur or enter into leadership? And how do I know what I'm going to do and what I want to do? How do you, looking backwards, find yourself where you are today? I mean, what triggered this? Did you know that Leading Giants has over 120 micro-learning modules from 4 to 19 minutes on entrepreneurship, communication, anything to maximize your influence? We are here to help you build the life of your dreams by maximizing your influence, growing a company, leading people at levels you've never led before. If you're in sales, having a greater opportunity for increased closing percentages and larger activity than you've ever had before. It's time now for you to jump in and join Leading Giants. All you have to do is press that button right down there. In order to access this, share with your friends, become a giant. We'll go slay some dragons.
Yeah, I've thought about this a few times and probably need to drill down a little bit more. I'm one of 7, and all 7 of us went into our own endeavors. Only 2 of us went to college, the Pinto kids growing up. My mom was very feisty, and so there was a spirit probably there, and my dad was kind of very meat and potatoes and just kind of pushing forward in his white collar job. He was very, very hardworking. So I think this combination of my dad's hardworking nature, but my mom's kind of free spirit created this background, and it probably ultimately was my mom's kind of spirit that spun off into the kids. But from a young age, I was out doing things. I had 2 paper routes, and I was getting up early on Saturday morning to be one of the first 3 people at the car wash to secure that spot for the next 5 to 6 hours of drying cars. And it just was always there. It never seemed strange to me because it was just how I viewed the world. And frankly, Dave, you may have experienced this in your own life. I think I project the entrepreneurial spirit on everyone. And kind of am surprised that maybe not everyone is this way. So I just think it was a worldview hatched somewhere along the way. And I think you will also bear witness to this. It has mostly been glorious and wonderful, but it has come at a great price, meaning you're restless all the time. Historically grinded my teeth at nighttime and awakened at 3 a.m. thinking about scenarios. So it comes with a price, but I recommend it. Ultimately, I recommend it to my own kids, and I recommend it to other people as well.
Yeah, there are 2 things that come out of that price. There's no doubt about it when you build and build and build, but you've done what entrepreneurs basically say is you've gone all the way to the end zone. You've built an organization. You were able to have an exit and sell it, and do well with that, but enjoy the process. And so that stress, at the end of the day, it has to be worth it for more than just the financial side of the exit, but what you've left behind. But I remember years ago, you saying that one of your gifts, this was privately, that is observation. You've been able to sit back and kind of see a circumstance and see what might be missing and identify a need or a value or the tweak in a marketing idea. And I have noticed this about you as well, too. Is this something that you recognize in retrospect that you had even before you went into entrepreneurship?
I do. And I've commented on this very point. So good insight or good question there. I thought about this and commented on this in public. I was, as I shared, I was the 6th child in a colorful family. In fact, my mom said that she gave birth to 6 performers and an accountant. I was the accountant, but the accountant, not literally, was in a colorful family. But Dave, also, we had a substance abuse sort of issue in my family growing up, and that created a certain kind of retreat on my part. And so this is a big, long-winded way of saying that being in this kind of colorful, theatrical family, and then also kind of pulling back and hiding a little bit, I think forged this default modality of observing. And then, again, in this colorful family, when it came time to speak, you needed to present well. So you're an observer first, but then you got to be a packager because you got this vivacious family. So you need to learn how to do that well. Point number 1. Point number 2, I've seen this, all of my life, that when I drive down a highway, I can't help but not only digest the billboards that I'm driving by at 65 miles an hour, but for the past 30 years, try and connect them to Catholicism. So this has been a habit, an unconscious habit. So I do think it is part and parcel of how I approach the world. For good or for ill, it was forged. But thanks be to God, it has resulted in many good things. And one final comment. When you and I watch maybe Home and Garden Network, we watch it over here at our house, I marvel at how...
For the record, you and I have never sat down with some potato chips watching any sort of Home and Garden show or anything related together. That's never happened. So everybody can just get that image out of their mind right now.
Correct. Cozied up on the couch has not happened. Has not happened.
Hey there, Giant. Dave Durand here, and I want to invite you to subscribe to our brand new e-newsletter where you will get the best of the best tips and insights to unlock the giant in you, build an empire, and slay some dragons. Sign up below. Let's go slay some dragons.
But I marvel, and I think we all marvel, that when we watch these incredibly talented home designers, when they walk into a house and they instantly know which walls should come down and where you should put, this and that and the other. And that's kind of how I see the world. It just happens. I just see the big picture, not always, but often instantly. And I think it's all connected to this maybe gift of observation.
Yeah, it is. I think for a lot of entrepreneurs too, there is this idea that when they're looking at something, they want to see how it can be better. So I have watched many ads and ad campaigns and product campaigns and just thought that was amazing. I mean, the talent they had behind that was remarkable. I literally, if I was in that meeting, I would have had nothing to add. I would have been the guy that would have sat back saying, I'm so glad this team is so brilliant that they came up with an idea I never could have. That's a part of it. But there's another part which says, did somebody really pay for that? I mean, someone's got to lose their job. This ad is just so deficient. I can't take it. And I'm trying to relax and just be okay with it, but I can't be. Same thing with humor. Like when I hear humor or I see something, sometimes I say that wit was so incredible. And other times I'm like, oh, we need to rewrite that, please. We can make that. It was so close to funny, but so far away. One of the biggest things is like local car commercials. They're like, I'm not the dumbest thing you're like, wait a second. Did you see this and review it before you actually put it on the air? Oh my goodness. Do you feel that too?
I do. And let me ask you a question in reverse from your experience in running different endeavors. I realized a little bit late in the Ascension Press game that I probably was kind of difficult to be in meetings with because of, I think, the gift that you have and maybe the gift that I have. And that is it could be better type of gift. Mm-hmm. And I do think it was a hard pace to keep up with. So, by the way, I apologize to any former staff. Anything like that happened.
But, at the end of the day, that's a gift you've given them. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Anybody who is a giant, anybody who becomes great in anything and leads other people who want to be giants is going to be in a circumstance where there's a healthy amount of conflict. And one of the things that the healthy amount of conflict is in regards to is this good enough yet? And that is, I think that's an awesome thing. I've never received a thank you note from anybody who I was easy on. But a lot from people who I've stretched, and it's the same thing with you as well too. So, hey, I want to get into one of the first questions that we like to ask our guests, and it's kind of a full circle, beginning with the end in mind that goes back to the beginning, I suppose you'd say, and that is if I'd have known then what I know now. You're sitting down and you're talking to the 20-year-old Matt Pinto, and you had some wisdom to give to yourself. What would that be?
Yeah. Where does one begin? How much time do we have? How much time?
We've got plenty. This is the nice thing about a podcast and a radio program is that we can move other segments around to open up room for your brilliance.
Well, okay. One of the first things that I probably would have done is, again, if I knew then what I know now, is I probably would have leveraged capital more. And I think, Dave, I was kind of overwhelmed. I had 5 sons and then we had a daughter, but I had 5 sons and I knew that they I knew I needed to be there for them, combined with the fact that although I had an entrepreneurial spirit, I'm not sure I was a good manager per se. So the combination of maybe being out of my element as a manager with the combination of really taking the family responsibility seriously, I was afraid of layering on, and I really didn't know how to do it, getting outside capital to grow Ascension faster. But with the mindset I have now, if I could pull myself back 10 years, frankly, I think Ascension could have been 3-4 times the size, and we were sizable in the Catholic world, maybe even the biggest in certain categories. So that's one thing. If I knew then what I know now, I would have leveraged capital. The second thing is,
I think sitting on that for a moment, I that happens to be one of mine too. Understanding the way money works, and I was very conservative about it. So I rubbed two sticks together and used our own capital to build. And when we had more revenue, we built more revenue. Whereas a lot of people I saw were working on opium right away, other people's money. And I didn't really understand how that worked. And I had a misperception of its goodness, thinking that it was bad. Yeah. But there's a lot of goodness in it.
Yeah, I think I can relate to that. Like, just a quick anecdote I remember from the past, and not that Mark Zuckerberg is a scion that we want to hold up, but I remember marveling that Mark Zuckerberg, after he had went out and got Silicon Valley money and then took the company public, that he only owned 17%. Now, that's a lot of Facebook, because I was used to having the majority position, and I didn't realize that it could be run with a minority position just as long as you maintain voting rights. So, but I was out of my element. I didn't want to take on the added pressure of other people's money.
By the way, to stay on that, I think a couple of different things. One is that there is an over perception of the intensity of using other people's money. And that is that all people who lend you money become bad and only interested in a bottom line, and they're going to be hatchet people. By the way, that is very true about a lot of people, and there are, without question, horror stories. But that's not the whole story. There are a lot of people who are very understanding when they invest money. They are supportive when they invest money. They're investing not just their money, but a little bit of mind share too, and they're willing to do that. So I would say that to any of our budding entrepreneurs that are looking to raise money, whether they're going to do a venture or an angel, or it's rare to get private equity money when you're a startup, you need to have some more of a proven track record. But no matter what you're going to do, that you definitely consider the dark side and the downside, because it's real and you have to go in with eyes wide open. But to know that if you think you're in the presence of a person who's going to lend you money that way, you may just be able to look further and find somebody who understands the magnitude of the circumstance in its full context and get that money. At the same time, too, here, you and I are both sitting here having started companies that we sold for large multiples and for a lot of money, and we're able to do that by rubbing two sticks together, too. So there's a lot of different options and that have gone a little faster, but I don't regret what I learned through it. But anyway, so just some tips for some of the people who are getting their start. What's the second thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would have brought senior leadership on at a higher level and sooner. Like if I were in my previous wonderful position with great people at Ascension, I would have probably placed the president in the company 10 years ago, and really just been the CEO, kind of setting the big vision and the rainmaker, going out and making business development happen. And, but at the time, you're involved in the product creation as well. But in hindsight, now it would have been potentially better to do it that way.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant piece of wisdom there. There's no question about it. When you look at people who've had exponential success, it is because they reduce the level of number of responsibilities they have in the organization, while they elevate their responsibility. And the way you just described it is a good one. And frankly, it's going to be useful. I can tell you this right now. When I think of the providential reason that you may have done that, it's to be on a program like this and other places, obviously, to be able to tell somebody else who needs to accelerate a little bit more that change, that, I don't know if you'd call it a mistake or that learning or observation. I think I would call it more than really a mistake, because there were two different paths, but it could have been an accelerator. And I think that's going to be useful to people. So it's really good advice. Any other things that stand out on the, if I would have known then what I know now?
One more, but let me amplify the second point just a little bit more. So in my new venture, the Genesis Group, literally immediately I identified a guy who is totally wired for presidency, operational running. So I'm, in the Rainmaker role, the CEO role. I'll be working with our portfolio companies, but this gentleman is wired, and
raising money.
Which is going to be, certainly part and parcel of the job. And
so you've basically taken your own advice. So because you know now what you know now, you are actually doing those very things that you just gave to yourself advice years ago. So that's phenomenal.
I did. I learned this one quickly, probably from the a bit of the pain of the prior experience. A third thing that is a corollary to the different type of leadership is my mom said to me a number of years ago. She was awesome. She said to me in my first 5 or 8 years of business, she said, "Matt, you're becoming someone different. Doesn't mean evil, just by any stretch. I think I was attentive to, my faith and being a good person, but I didn't have the disposition for maybe serving in the senior role, because I think I was a little bit too anxious." And she said I became different in that I lost kind of the person who loves other people, who loves humor, who is just kind of more balanced and integrated. And here's the third point I'm making from this. I learned in hindsight, a little too late, that culture is massive. And you know this from Pat Lencioni and others. And the takeaway is that had I been able maybe to be not the operational president, but the CEO floating around the company, really giving love and attention to the culture, I think it would have been better for them, better for me, better for the company as a whole. So I think being attentive to culture, a lot of my relationships, at Ascension and 1 or 2 other places, they were good and noble, and people would say that they were treated well, but they became a little too transactional. And that's really not me in the essence of who I was. So I had to kind of adapt this personality, where I adapted it by default, that was not conducive to creating a premium culture. We had a good culture, but not a premium culture. And a premium culture would have taken us even further, I believe. So I learned a little too late that I should have been a floater versus maybe the operational manager, because at the end of the day, I like people, I love people, and they just did not get enough of that from me. And I think I would have changed that in hindsight.
That's a really interesting thing. I was talking to somebody the other day who was giving a speech, a very good leader. And at the end of the speech, somebody said, "Who's more important, the CEO or the entry-level employee?" It's a trick question. Their answer was, "I'm going to get back to you on that." And they came back and they said, basically, whoever's in front of the customer. It's a good answer. Okay. But they said, "What would you have said?" And I said, I have the answer instantaneously. An instantaneous answer. There is no question, absolutely, without a doubt, the CEO. Not because the individual dignity of the person is more important. No, that's equal. And not even because that particular individual is the CEO, but it's the position of CEO, because that position of CEO has the power and the authority to get rid of the problematic frontline worker and to get the really good one in there, so that that frontline worker is happy next to the person next to them and something good is produced. Frankly speaking, if the CEO makes a bunch of bad decisions that ruin the culture and ruin the product, then everybody's gone. And so this is a modern socialistic idea that we're somehow supposed to say the position of an entry-level person has the same value or the same importance as the CEO. It's garbage. And by the way, when I was the entry-level worker at Hardee's in high school, or cleaning the bar that I cleaned, or when I had my own paper route, I absolutely wasn't nearly as important as the CEO who was leading me, or in fact, the supervisor who supervised me above that too. So it's some sort of like ridiculous pride thing to walk in and say, "I'm an entry-level worker. I therefore is important as the CEO." But it's a trick question. I mean, the entire thing is the dignity is equal to both, but that role is more important. I don't know. What is your take on this?
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Then let me share both the early Ascension and then the later Ascension. And again, it was an unbelievable life and great people. So any little tweak I make of myself is just that, a little tweak. It was pretty extraordinary experience. In the beginning, let's say 10 years, I was hard charging, I was clear, I was setting the pace. And then maybe either because I became tired or because I became affected by the culture, which once egalitarianism, I think became too egalitarian, and a company without a leader setting direction can waffle. And I actually think at times some of the younger employees, I wasn't really helping them because I was sending a message of sort of substantial egalitarianism, and I'm not sure that was good for their futures,
for anybody,
and careers. So this actually was another change maybe I would make, but the point being is the company we did well the whole 23 years, and they're doing particularly well now because they have a good leader there. But there was an element where the leader, the one maybe with the charism and the vision, pulled back a little too much. Maybe that's because when you become successful, also you become a little bit more conservative because you want to protect what you have. They say regimes are dangerous on their way up and on their way down. And in our first 10 years, we were dangerous in the good sense of the word. So I think, but it echoes the point that you're making. Yeah. Despite what the world is saying about everything needing to be equal, no. You have to have that clear leadership and vision and clarion call to everyone.
Giants, we need your help with something. The world desperately needs more giants like you. Head over to Apple Podcasts and give this podcast a 5-star rating so we can build an army of giants and go slay dragons together.
You know, what happens is a person will say, listen, you know, the culture comes from the top. You need to be responsible for the culture. The buck stops there. It's no faster than the lead dog. Okay. And then they say, my job as an entry level person is just as important. No. Every one of those things that you just pointed the finger at and said about the other person, you better own those if your job is going to be the most important one. And I think that there's a virtue signaling that takes place when people want to make this equal thing. They want to just be perceived. They don't believe it. They don't believe it. They know that person, when they make these changes, the organization is going to go up or it's going to go down according to the weight that person carries on their shoulders, because other people don't have the same power or authority that they have. And to cede that is to not do good. You've mentioned margin too as something that you reflect upon over these years. How does that play into this, if I don't know, and then what I
Yeah. I mean, this didn't dawn on me until maybe 5-7 years into Ascension. And just a little context. When I launched Ascension initially, I did it, and I always did it over those 20 years for the love of the mission. I love the church. I believe in the Lord. I attempt to follow the Lord. So, but we didn't even think about dollars in the first number of years. We were just doing mission. And, but it dawned on me maybe 5 years in that, oh, wait a second, margin, and margin, for those who may not know, is really the difference between the cost and what you're selling it for. How much margin is in there for you to have a profit so you can invest more and things like that. So I think we were creating just to create clever products in the beginning, but later we realized, oh, wait a second, if we have more cushion here, we can actually help the church better. How so? If we have margin, we have more profit. If we have more profit, we can hire more staff, including customer service, to help the churches. We could also invest in new products that the churches would want in the future. And so what I used to say to an occasional parish or an occasional diocese is, Father Smith or Mr. Smith, the reason why our prices are X is ultimately for your benefit, because the stronger and healthy Ascension is, the better our pipeline is for your and your parishioners' future getting fed. We can hold your hand more in this process of learning how to do this new thing called adult faith formation in small groups. So in short, Dave, I just realized that often in the faith-based world, money, either spoken or unspoken, is secretly seen as maybe bad or evil. Mm-hmm. Whereas if there is no money, there is no mission. And as long as we're guarding our hearts, and I believe we did guard our hearts throughout those years, among other things, we were a tithing company specifically to guard our hearts. As long as you're guarding your hearts, running a normal, good, healthy business margin is ultimately best for the receiver, the one who's going to receive your products. And in our case, it was ultimately best for the church. So I sort of steeled my mind that no, this principle is correct. We need to stay in this direction of looking for margin. And then one final point. From this kind of thought process, I came up with a motto that we used to use at Ascension, and that is, we create the product and the pricing based on what it objectively should be. And then we help those who cannot afford it separately. So you deal with the exceptions as exceptions. You don't set your business model based on sentimentality. You set it based on what it needs to be for the operation to run properly. And then you deal with exceptions as exceptions. So in a lot of our materials, we always used to write, if there is a financial need, please contact us. But we set the number based on what the number needed to be for a healthy company, because it ultimately benefited the church and the individuals who bought our materials.
You know, one of the things that I've always found interesting is when you have a mission-based thing, or it's a non-for-profit, or there are numbers involved, there's almost always somebody who comes along and says, I don't believe in the numbers. You know, if it's like an evangelization thing or a feeding the poor thing or whatever, they'll say something like, it's not about numbers to me, it's about the mission. Okay, literally, how can you separate the two? I mean, to really nail this, even the Bible talks about how many were baptized. There's numbers that matter. If you have 10 kids and you're going to feed them, are the numbers going to matter? Yeah, I'm just trying to feed the kids. Well, how many did you feed? It doesn't really matter. No, 10 out of 10. You want all the numbers. There's nothing funnier than people being in a non-for-profit, sitting around talking about how evil money is, and then saying, okay, what's next on our agenda? Fundraising. We're going to go ask the rich people with all the money for their money so that we can take that to pay our salaries and run this great business using the money of the evil people who care about money. I mean, it's like so backwards. And they're unnecessarily in competition with each other. You know, clearly, if you're going to be a good steward, you're going to pay attention to the numbers and you're going to pay attention to the dollars and you're going to build it that way. And so it's a great lesson for people to learn. You just provided some really good gold there. I have a segment that sounds a little bit like cynical or antagonistic, but it's not meant to be that, because oftentimes there are unknowing enemies at the gate, but it just is a little more exciting to actually label it this way. But I do call this enemies at the gate. You know, was there ever a time that there was a competitor or an adversary or an outside factor, an economic thing that was just kind of, you know, throwing stones at your organization as you were trying to run the races, and you had to deal with it and it changed how you went about what you did?
Yeah, another good question. Probably over the 23 years, there were 100, small or large enemies at the gate, meaning principals or maybe persons. But a couple of things come to mind. The first thing, working in a faith-based world, and we kept this front of mind most of the time, was our competitors were not as much the other Catholic publishers, who, by the way, I'm friends with and are good people and really doing good work. It was less that as much as it was apathy. Because, Dave, let me just share with you that even if Ascension and some of the other good names that you know out there, Bishop Barron and Augustine Institute, Matthew Kelly and OSV and Sophia and St. Benedict, even if we were all clipping at a very high level, we're probably only feeding 7 to 10% of practicing Catholics combined. And so the real, quote, enemy would be just apathy on the part of even the mass goers who don't know. They're not being evil. They just don't know that they should actively form themselves, their hearts and their minds in the faith. So that would be the first thing. On a natural level, of course, and again, they were friendly competitors, there was a competitive element. One small kind of maybe enemy at the gate, to use that phrase, was after Ascension figured out much in this adult faith formation, small study group workbook world, we had a number of people just kind of reverse engineering what we were doing. And so it became crowded, in that regard. Maybe a little bit of an enemy at the gate. It was more so in the first 5 to 10 years of Ascension from like 2000 to 2010 was a mentality in the church of should we pay for materials and how much should we pay? Now that changed. Go.
In retrospect, I was one of the enemies at the gate.
Okay.
Well, I was running a competitive company. Not really, and we always saw things together. But in my lighthouse days, inadvertently, we were doing things that we never would have thought. You would have said, "Hey, maybe that's market share that we're needing to gobble up or emulate." Maybe you didn't look at it that way at all. I never thought of that until just now. But
yeah. So speaking about what you guys had done, I actually used to put Lighthouse as really one of the ones who were clipping at a high level and really had figured a number of things out. I didn't view the CDs really as much of a competitor because we were doing books and we were doing learning systems.
well, I mean, when we started doing the books, that's what I was interested.
Yeah. I know that could definitely be seen maybe as something. So let me just tell you maybe one final enemy at the gate. COVID. It really might have been the only time in those 20 years when I was nervous with a capital N. If you're a business owner, you're always a little bit nervous. In fact, I love the title of Andy Grove, who was either the founder of Intel or the president of Intel, CEO. He wrote a book called Only the Paranoid Survive. And I can absolutely relate to that book title. It could have been maybe my persona, but I think a lot of principals of companies are always nervous. But the time that I was nervous with a capital N was about a month into COVID, where all the parishes that really were probably 65, 70% of our business shut down. And so there was no selling for small groups. And
And that's huge.
Dave, we had to pivot very quickly. And it was really one of maybe the shining moments in the 23 years where we did pivot very quickly. And we went completely online. It kind of forced us to do what we knew we had to do. And that was even more online presence. And we turned our learning systems into digital learning systems. And we came out with, like, in a 2-month period of time, 125 live programs during that 2-month time period. About 7 days into COVID, or maybe 10 at most, we had come up with our first live program. So we pivoted very hard, but that was an existential threat. And what I say to people is we worked time and a half to just keep pace over that whole year. We worked 150% just to stay at 100%, previous year.
Yeah, that's a great story. I remember too, years back when The Passion came out, you were really savvy on understanding that there was going to be an audience who wanted to understand this at a deeper level. And so you guys came out with a book to help provide and fill that in. And that sold like crazy, didn't it?
It did. And Dave, this really is maybe, and again, I don't want this to sound like a boast, but this was a top 5 moment in Ascension history. Someone invited me to see a screening of the movie about a month before the movie came out, maybe 2 months. And so I flew up to Minnesota, St. Paul, Minneapolis, probably stopped to say hello to Jeff Cavins, who I worked with very closely. And then I went to see this movie.
By the way, a good guy, despite being a Viking fan.
Well,
all the good judgment he has, and then he has that.
Dave, I'm revealing something that you may not know. From the age of 5 on, I've been a Vikings fan.
This show is over. Nico, cut his. No. Actually, I should have said that. I should actually instead ask you at this moment of recording who the Vikings play this weekend.
No one No.
Oh, that's right. They're not in the playoffs like the Packers.
By the way,
how embarrassing. I'm so sorry if that embarrassed you.
No. I like the whole central black and blue division. And I was absolutely rooting for the Packers this week. And I like the Packers. I like the Lions. I like the Bears as well, believe it or not. So
now that was being recorded. This Viking fan just said nice things about the Packers, and we have it on record. Okay. Anyway, I digress. You went up. You were in Minneapolis. Somebody told you about the Passion. You saw
I saw the movie, and I had a 3-hour drive to La Crosse because that's where our home office and our distribution was based. And during that 3-hour call, I dictated, I think it was 60 or 70 questions to someone over the phone for that 100-question book.
Wow, that's fast.
Myself and another person, we took about 3 hours. He took notes and I dictated. He came up with his own ideas, and we fashioned a book idea on that 3-hour drive. I think it was 3 to 4 weeks later, it was out the door. And the evangelical world was already responding in spades to the Passion movie, and there was no Catholic response. So there was build-up tension in the Catholic world. And Dave, the upshot of all of it is that when we released the book, I think on Ash Wednesday, or 2 days before Ash Wednesday. Within that first week, I think we sold 140,000 copies. A Catholic bestseller is 10,000 copies 10 years ago. Now it's probably 7,000 copies. And we then proceeded over the next 13.
By the way, for perspective, for people who don't understand, you can make the New York Times bestseller list with about 15,000 copies now of any type of book that comes out. So there's like 10 times the level of that in your first week.
Yes. And I actually sat down with the president of Doubleday. He told me, so this was a good number of years ago, 2004 or 5, that it was 30,000 at the time. So it makes sense that it might be 15,000 now because it's harder to sell books now. So anyhow, we did 140,000 books in that first week. And over the next 10 weeks, we translated it into 6 languages, and we sold about 600,000 hard copies and 400,000 licensed all around the world. And Dave, we had another 5 or 6 books that were being released that season, but we moved them to September the next season because they got no attention. And so it really was a great moment. And but there was a bigger point maybe, and that is maybe your first question, or one of your first questions, is that at Ascension, we just kind of looked at the world all the time, as I shared with you about looking at the billboards and seeing how they relate to Catholicism. So we were always plugged in. And when I heard about the Passion movie happening, along with the Da Vinci Code and along with a few other things, Chronicles of Narnia, we knew they were coming. We responded quickly. And I would say to any entrepreneur, even once you know what your year's plan is, you should always have someone, I think, in the organization who is on edge and always thinking about what the next big thing needs to be. Because unless you're creating, I think there's a danger zone. So that was one of the things that was a great success.
Yeah.
The Passion book.
And it's a great bookend. It's a great bookend topic to say COVID created, as the mother of invention is necessity, right? It created necessity. You saw that coming and you transformed the organization for the better in many different ways. And so that's like a negative observation and circumstance it's forced change, basically.
Yeah.
The book about the Passion was not forced change, but that was, that's change you're forcing upon yourself. That is to say, we have a plan. We have a bunch of books coming out. We've got a bunch of products that are coming out. We can just stay the course. No. We're going to pivot. We see something, we're taking advantage of it, and we're going to move things. And I think that ability to pivot is something that most entrepreneurs don't have. They get rigid and they have this false understanding of never quit. And you have to oftentimes alter your plan in order to accomplish the big goal, and you did it brilliantly in that. So one of the sections we talk about here is spinning your tires. And it's a little bit different than when you ran into COVID and you have enemies at the gate and challenges. It's just like one of these things where you just feel like you're never getting traction. Have you faced times like that? Because entrepreneurs they're in that mode way more, and they think they're alone. They don't realize that other entrepreneurs are experiencing it all the time. What has been that for you?
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure many, many times you kind of forget all the things that and all the sacrifices and all the struggles. I've jokingly said that it's a little bit, I'm sure, like a woman who gives birth, and at the time it's intense, but then evidently they seem to forget the pain an hour or two later. So I forget a lot of those things from the past. But I got to tell you, I have an example that just happened in the past month of. So I'm launching a new entity, the Genesis Group, this Catholic venture capital. And from like early November until December 31st, basically, we were circling the airport just waiting for our legal documents. And there were other things that we could do, but we really couldn't do anything. I couldn't really speak to potential LPs because I couldn't consummate those transactions because I didn't have the paperwork. So I got to tell you, here's how I resolved it in my head and heart, and then operationally. In my head and heart, I just said, I'm going to choose to be at peace here. We're doing everything, in my view, Lord, we're doing everything right now. So there's nothing I can do. And then Thanksgiving and Christmas were also coming at that time. So there's nothing I can do. Operationally, what we did is we just pivoted on our cash burn. We just lowered our expenses. And because I knew that, we could get certain things done, but there were other things we just couldn't get done. So this is very apropos because I just came out of literally 10 days ago, the spinning of the wheels. And the reason why I've been excited for the past 7 to 10 days is the horse is now out of the gate and I can go, God willing, do my thing now. But I just came out of this, Dave, this very, very spinning the wheels. In fact, I was using those very words, spinning the wheels, to a few friends and my wife, probably, half dozen times over the past month.
Yeah, I mean, that type of circumstance, I always tell you that one of the differences between leaders that really lead at a high level, giants that is, versus the kind of the nano mentality is that leaders are patient in all things, but wait for nothing. And when you have something like that that's happening, there's still an undercurrent of work that you were doing so that by the time the tires stopped spinning, you were able to hit that ground running in that 10 days and getting all those ducks in a row and ready to go and being productive in other ways. But there is a time where, patience is just the thing. You have to endure it. You have to endure kind of some difficult things that in essence build your character while you're productive doing things you didn't expect or anticipate doing because you want to do something else. So it's a good point. Hey, we talk about people talk about branding a lot, the personal brand. What is your personal brand? What is the brand of your company? A lot of people are confused about branding, but one of the ways of looking at it, among other, we have full courses on what branding is, but it's distinguishing yourself in a particular way. What are the ways that you distinguish yourself? What stands out that says, if I have ever been connected to a Matt Pinto product company idea or even personality, what is it that stands out? Why are you different than somebody else?
Yeah, I mean, I think there could be a few things, but two in particular. One, we were known in the Catholic world for good production values and good packaging. And we just hired good designers. And here's a little anecdote, Dave, that you might like. So 20 years ago in the Catholic world, for someone to spend $500 for a book cover was probably a little heart-dropping for that person. But we were spending $3,000 for a book cover or $4,000. We were hiring good designers. In fact, I think you'll like this anecdote. When we did our rebrand of our Ascension name, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, we interviewed 2 Catholic firms and 2 secular firms. And one of the secular firms came in and they really had a bohemian alternative look, to the people who came in the door, nose piercings. And I remember saying to my staff, off the record, I said, kind of, the more piercings, the better. And the point I was making with that is that we would protect Catholicism. We would protect the integrity of Catholicism, but I needed people coming in who saw differently. I needed people who coming in who could create a logo and a look that would appeal to my cousin John. I don't have a cousin John, but my cousin John or my neighbor Steve, who was not practicing the faith. I needed to do things differently. So one thing we were known for, I think, in the church was being probably a few steps more progressive than most of the apostolates that were out there. So that was one thing. And another thing is we had our ear to the ground. It wasn't an accident that we created the Passion book or the Chronicles of Narnia book or the Da Vinci book, a week, a month, multiple months before they came out. When I heard that the church was going to do the liturgical language change at the Mass, we reacted very quickly and created a very good product. And Dave, we ended up like that fall season, which is the big season, ended up having our program used by about 4,000 parishes because we kind of saw the tea leaves. So two things. Our packaging was...
I mean, by the way, for perspective for the listeners, that is... I mean, I know you and I both know whether these numbers work. From a practical perspective, that is about 40% of the market. I mean, that's a huge market share.
Yeah, very good. Thanks for that. One of the questions I used to ask in the interview process, and you always are delicate here, but I used to ask to the younger people, explain to me how you're not part of the entitled generation. It was a touchy question, but I was looking for that.
Did any of them tell you that they thought you owed them that answer?
No.
I'm kidding. That was an entitlement answer. I just, sometimes my humor is only funny to me.
I'm sorry. I missed that one. Most of the people who came to Ascension were solid and ready to rock and do great things. And we did. We had, in fact, one other thing, Dave, to counterbalance that statement about entitlement. I remember turning to some of my senior executives and saying, I want a steady stream of 22 and 23-year-olds coming in these doors because they do see the world differently and they challenged us. And I got to tell you, some of Ascension's recent blessings in the last 10 years were from some of our young people who just saw the world differently, and we were able to pivot.
Oh, yeah. I mean, one of the things I like about the young generation is their micro-learning mentality. I mean, this is something that, these old dogs like you and me were generally accustomed to a formal class by a formal credentialed person over a period of time that is inconvenient to us and convenient to them to get a credential. And in reality, now you can basically find anything on YouTube and learn how to do it in a 4-minute video, which is pretty incredible. I mean, none of us would want to go to a surgeon who learned that way, but there's a lot of things you can learn and things that don't require particular accreditation, like some, accounting, finance related things, or like I said, medical or legal things. Most everything else you can kind of learn on your own now. And I think it's wise for leaders to back off quite a bit on formal credentials. One of the best employees I ever had in one of my secular companies was in programming. He was a developer for our IS team, and he had a theology degree of all degrees. But he came really highly recommended. He just crushed it in the role. Anyway, we are at the conclusion of our time here, Matt, and it's just been great to share these ideas and to talk to you about what you've done to build great things and to lead and to organize and to pivot and to change, and the dedication that you have to your faith to get these things done is such an inspiration to so many people. Any just concluding words in the next 60 seconds?
No. I think if anyone who's listening, if you knock, the Lord will answer. If you seek, you will find. Ask the Lord for what your charism is, what you're called to. And I believe the Lord will give you that answer. So, and Dave, I just want to say this again. I think you know this already, but I'm a big fan. Keep doing what you're doing. It's making a difference. You're a powerhouse, and good things and many blessings are coming from what you're doing. So keep fighting the good fight. I'm going to be delighted to be in the vineyard with you.
Oh, thank you, Matt. And you're a part of that. And of course, have been an inspiration to me for decades. So I really am grateful for everything you've done. And grateful for everybody that's listening right now. If you want to become a giant, you have an opportunity to do it by listening to people like Matt Pinto, who's a giant in his industry and a giant influence. I would encourage you to go to Leading Giants in order to learn more about our programs. And if you have any questions and you want to email those out so we can answer them during our monthly Q&A on Durand On Demand, you can go to leadinggiants.com. You'd actually email us at info@leadinggiants.com. That's info@leadinggiants.com. Until next week, go out there and slay some dragons. Hey there, Giant. Thanks for watching Durand On Demand. I need your help with something. The world desperately needs more Giants. You know it, and I know it. We've been around a lot of people struggling, figuring out how to make things go. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this with as many people as you can. We're going to build this audience, and we're going to help people slay dragons together.